Good evening, everybody. Our guests have started coming in, so we are hopeful at 6. So I thank all of you informally right at the beginning of this session for consenting to participate and spare your Sunday evening. I'm sure we'll have an enjoyable session.
Good evening, Srivardhan from Chennai.
Good evening, Mr. Srivardhan. Good of you to join. Thanks to Mr. Raja Mukherjee, I could get in touch with you. So welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Srivardhan is from Chennai and is one of the guests this evening. Another 5 minutes more and then we can start. So bear with us. Prithvi, will you check if you can unmute yourself? Because you had logged out in the meanwhile. So out of the 6 panelists, how many went out for a drive yesterday, today? Raja, I know went. Rupak, did you go out today with your car?
No, unfortunately not. I didn't brave the rain.
I see. Prithvi, your Sunday jaunt?
Prithvi is
Okay,
muted.
okay. You'll be unmuted in a while, I guess, Prithvi. Oh, hi, Shovik. Nice to have you on board. Prithvi, you had mentioned some young children may be joining in. I think one of them is in Arav Oberoi. I guess he's one of your people. Okay, good. Welcome, Arav. Arav is possibly the youngest member in our audience.
Two men stand out, and Dave Stane. These two actually have to have parts. Who is the greatest test bowler of the 21st century? It's the London Lion, Muthaiya Muralitharan.
This is the fastest spell batsman around the world. And with more than 5.
For those who do not know, we are all wishing Billy happy birthday today. And that's why there are a lot of messages in the chat box. So have a great day, Billy, and I hope you have a rocking party in the evening. We'll catch up in a non-virtual mode in a little while.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for making time this evening, and welcome to this Heritage Talk, Cars and Us, on the vintage and classic heritage. Without much ado, let me introduce the panelists and the moderator for this evening, Mr. Deboshi Shadon Bose Pillai is the 6th generation of the 170-year-old EC Bose group of companies, as you would know, the oldest stevedoring concern in India. Being the son of our past president, Partha Shadon Bose, who himself was a stalwart Indian motorsports and vintage and classic cars fraternity. It is not surprising that Billy has grown up with one passion: cars. A word which, according to his parents, He uttered probably before he uttered Ma and Baba. Growing amidst restoration of vintage and classic cars and preparation of high-speed rally cars, Billy took up both as his only religion, being nicknamed as a flying Xaverian. He's been probably India's youngest national championship rally and racing driver. He was also the only one from Eastern India to be part of the JK Tyre national rally team till a freak attack ended his career. But vintage and classic cars has always been his parallel love. Right through school and college days, when boys of his age looked at other sports and interests, Billy, he was busy learning about restoration to perfection, changing and upgrading car parts by himself, taking car books and magazines as his own hobby and passion. Not a day passes when his attention is diverted from the grand old ladies, as he calls them. So much so that his cars and him have been covered by most national newspapers, magazines, and also global media houses. He himself has been an author, speaker for media houses. Next, we move on to the father and son restoration duo, Vallabh Roy and Saurabh Roy. I do not think they didn't need too much of an introduction. Hailing from the Qasim Bazar royal family, Rajbari, and from the sugar and spice world, well, you count out their passion for the tennis courts, and of course, who would not have read in the papers recently as the work that he has done to restore and renovate the Wanderers, which is displayed at Netaji Bhavan. Next, we pass on to our next speaker, Prithvi Nath Tagore. Well, Prithvi, he's been passionate about vintage and classic cars ever since he can remember. He's a tea taster and an auctioneer by profession. Prithvi's great-grandfather, Raja P.N. Tagore, was a past president of Calcutta Club, and he owned some fine cars during his time. His passion passed on to his grandfather and father, both of whom were members of our club. Virtually interesting, and anything interesting and old appeals to him, ranging from old buildings to furniture and other antiquities. In 2017, along with his friends, Shovik Ghosh Chaudhary and one of our co-panelists tonight, Rupak Ghosh, they formed the Classic Drivers Club, which today is the preeminent heritage motoring club in Calcutta, with ties to other regional and overseas motoring clubs. Well, what to say about our next panelist, as we call him Rajada, Raja Mukherjee. He himself picked from the family of one of the founder members of our club. Well, he has been a regular at all vintage and classic car rallies here in Kolkata, and he has been a chief judge in Kolkata here and other cities as well. And he has been an integral part of our heritage subcommittee now and over the years. Welcome, Rajada. Next, Rupak, as we mentioned, Rupak Ghosh. He's a relatively new member of our club from 2018, but he's been very quick to be a part of the ethos of this place that we all call our second home. Well, he hails from a family of lawyers and judges who have adorned the bar and the bench, and he's currently the fourth generation in pursuit of legal excellence. Rupak has been born and brought up in a 100-year-old house in North Calcutta or Kolkata, and as such, being attracted and appreciative of anything antique, old, and rusty came as a part of his growing up. Rupak is quite an antiquarian with varied interest in old manual clocks, watches, pocket watches, jazz LP records, et al. But above all these comes his love for restoring and driving vintage and classic cars. He has owned several cars starting from the Morris 8, Austin 7 Tourer, a 1947 Pontiac, and the 1948 MGTC. And last, our moderator for the evening, Pradeep Gupta. Well, he dabbles in balance sheets, cars, and heritage. He devotes much time instigating people to debate at Calcutta Debating Circle and on debate training. Well, his other passions are road travel and photography. But before I hand over to moderator, there is our last panelist for the evening, Siddharth Swarup. Siddharth is schooling from St. Xavier, Kolkata, the mechanical engineer by profession, and after graduating with top honors from Pune, he went on to do his MBA from IIM Calcutta. For machines, took him training to Germany, where he learned about the German manufacturing industry. Siddharth's ingenious and unique ability with gadgets, owned by his engineer father, and who relates with much pride how Siddharth, while in middle school, components of a Maruti 800 and put them back together with unique additions. Siddharth says, have inspired him to find innovative and clever solutions in the mechanical world. Enthused by the stretched limousine, he created one of the longest tube pinning machines in the world by splitting it and stretching it from the middle. On his 16th birthday, he was presented with a 1947 Wolseley 1460, which arrived from his ancestral house in Benares on a truck. The car was in such a dilapidated condition that his family was unable to find a buyer for it. Therein began his romance with this Wolseley. Over to the moderator, Pradeep Gupta, for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, in particular to the panelists, extremely eminent professionals in their field. I also, right at the beginning, wish to, I can see 3 guests from outside Kolkata, who I wish to specially welcome, Mr. Srivardhan from Chennai, Mr. Ravi Prakash and Mr. Gautam Sen, India's most eminent motoring journalist, now based in Paris. We thank you for joining in at our program. This is a Calcutta Club program by the members, for the members, of the members, but we are a very hospitable lot and it's always a pleasure to receive all of you in our midst. All the panelists here represent not just car crazy individuals or the tribe of car crazy individuals, but also genuine lovers of heritage. This entire exercise, if I may recall correctly, and Raja will perhaps confirm this, began in January 2020, when the then president of Calcutta Club, Subrata Basu, said, just give me a list of names who I can call for a show of cars owned by members of Calcutta Club in our club parking lot. Well, the messaging was ready. The date was fixed for the 29th of March. Man proposes, virus disposes. We were hit on the head with a sledgehammer and society fell apart and everything was cancelled. The show will still happen. I'm sure it will happen when normal times return. But in the meanwhile, this is a very small beginning to try to protect, project, and defend our heritage. For those of you who are not initiated, you know that in recent months, the Indian Motor Vehicles Act threatened to make all Indian vintage and heritage vehicles extinct, which is all vehicles made more than 50 years ago. to drive them off the streets, to make them make us illegal to own them because they would not clear pollution test and this and that. Luckily, it seems better sense has dawned and our automotive heritage will not be lost. That's because heritage is important to all of us. The heritage of our sound is important in Indian music and in Indian drama. The heritage of our buildings is important to us because we preserve our monuments and we preserve our sculpture and we preserve our temples. The heritage of our industry is important to us because I think it is high time we not just preserve our old factories and museum pieces, but also very importantly, the treasure of Indian automobiles, in India that have been built up over the years. Raja will confirm, Gautam Sen will confirm even more in greater detail that India was for many, many years, as it is today, one of the largest automotive markets in the world. There was no automobile manufacturer anywhere globally who could ignore the Indian market. And this lasted till, of course, we stopped imports. We've opened up again. We've once again become one of the largest automotive markets in the world. This tradition has been revived, but this does not mean that we will forget our past. We are determined to protect that. There are some ground rules of any such conference. You will all be on mute. I'm sure if you have any questions, you will put them in the chat box and we will do our level best if we have the time to address them towards the end of the session. We also have some thank yous to give on my behalf, in particular the Heritage Subcommittee of Calcutta Club led by Adip Guptu, Romit Bid, who's helping out on the technical side, Sohini Guptu also helping out on the technical side, Piali of the library who has been sending you the links, etc., etc., the honored guests and all members of the Calcutta Club and your friends who are here this evening. It's a very, very busy evening and thank you for joining. Now for our 6 panelists, you heard their formal introduction. There is a sequence in their order of speaking. So with tongue firmly in cheek, let me tell you the sequence. First, we will have Rupak, who despite his very respectable looks has a naughty streak in him. He's picked up an MG sports car and no car represents a better one to pick up girls than an MG open sports car. So Rupak has a getaway car. So Rupak will talk about his MG and of course his other favorite cars. Now, when you get away with a girl, you're chased by the police. So Siddharth Swarup will come in next with a police chase car, a 6-cylinder Wolseley, which I'm sure through generations has chased American airmen running away with British girls on the streets of UK. And Siddharth will present his Wolseley 6-cylinder police car and his other favorites. We will then have Prithvi. We don't want to ignore the continent, who will come up with 2, a Fiat and an Alfa Romeo. And Prithvi, we look forward to that. In the middle, he's thrown in the Mercedes that he's restoring. That Mercedes model features very prominently in the James Bond movie Goldfinger as the car that the villains used. So evidently, he too has a naughty streak in him. We will then move on to the very respected Raja Mukherjee, as you heard, a judge of vintage and classic car shows, who will, in his staid usual fashion, present a regal Rolls-Royce, a Phantom 3 with 12 cylinders. This is not to deny the fact that Raja is as naughty as Prithvi or Rupak on their bad days, but he will choose to present a Rolls-Royce and a Buick and pretend to be very upright about it. But I have always admired and respected his choice of cars. And without his help, this program would not have been put together. Then we will have Billy, who will talk of the immortal Model T. And Billy will, in addition, talk of the fabulous collection put together by his father, including the SS100, which I really, really love. It's a wonderful car to have. And finally, Pallav and Saurabh Roy. Pallav will bring to our show his focus on American metal, American luxury, the Studebaker limousine, and his many other cars, the Mercury, the Mercedes-Benz, the Chevrolet, and so many others. Pallav is also a wonderful restorer. At the end of the show, we will see the incredible work he has done with the absolutely decrepit Wanderer that was used by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose in his last journey, in his escape out of Kolkata. And that is a wonderful restoration. The car is running. The car is started up twice a week. And I know personally because I'm involved in some of the things that happen at the Netaji Bhavan Museum. Romit Bid has thrown in a curved ball. He has brought in 2 horns, which I guess he intends to play whenever we overshoot our time limit. But don't be surprised if in the middle of your session you hear either a multi-tone trumpet or a monotone trumpet being played by Romit. He has some horn tucked away somewhere. To repeat once again, you are all quiet on the audio-wise, but please post your questions in the chat box and we'll try to accommodate them. Now, the moderator generally extracts his pound of flesh in such matters, and I have a small presentation to make. It's about my pride and joy, which I use on a regular basis, which in fact I used even today. So may I request Romit Bid to please present the small presentation we have. Dear viewers, all of us will be doing a brisk presentation with a voiceover at the side. So Romit, can we have the first presentation? So this is me and my car. It's a 1931 Baby Austin. It has an enclosed body. It has a sunroof, and we are very fond of it. It was extracted. It was owned by a distant relative, became a garbage heap, a garbage drum in later years because he used the sunroof to dump garbage inside. It was extracted and restored and repainted. The body was rebuilt. And we'll move on to the next slide, please, Romit. The importance of this car is that in 1922, Herbert Austin not just drew it on his dining table with a small draftsman, but he was determined to produce a car that could seat 2 adults and 2 children and carry them in waterproof, weather-insulated comfort through reasonable distances with reliability and at not too great a cost. As a result, he produced one of the landmark cars. This is a top view of the car. I think close to 400,000 plus of them were made. It was the first car assembled by what is today BMW, the first car assembled by Nissan, the first car assembled by the company that later designed and produced the Jeep. And it is a very serviceable little car. It's still very usable. It has excellent ventilation. And even in the hottest summer day, it's not unbearable. It's in fact quite decent. Next one, please. Okay. When I mean 2 adults and 2 children, I don't mean an Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean a normal sized human being. So the interiors of this car, which you can see, the seating is okay. It's all right for 2 adults in front and 2 children at the back. The steering wheel is very interesting. It has, as is usual in cars of that time, a hand throttle and an advanced retard mechanism for the ignition. And that really helps when you're going up the many flyovers in Kolkata or when you're trying to climb any other bridge on a vintage car rally route, which the judges take great pleasure in throwing into our way. So, but it's a usable car. 4-wheel brakes. The handbrake engages the wire brakes in front. The foot brake engages the wire brakes at the back. 4-speed gearbox, Synchromesh in 3 of them. And overall, a usable little vehicle. Next one, please. Yeah, we'll pass this on. This is just a view of the sunroof. And okay, you know, it always amazes me and it amuses me to amaze other people to show them what exactly or how little it takes to actually move a car. The engine of the Baby Austin, for those who haven't seen it, is all about 1 foot and 1 inch long and 8 inches wide and about 18.5 inches tall. That's all that it needs to make a car move. For many, many years, this little engine has propelled, as I said, over 400,000 of these vehicles around the world, including a flotilla of Baby Austins owned, I later learned, by the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir. And you can't imagine the gurgles of satisfaction and happiness that Dr. Karan Singh emitted when he came down to Calcutta and I got him to take a look at the Baby Austin. And he said, you know, my father had one, my grandfather had several. So I don't know how they climbed the hills of Kashmir, but evidently there was some way they could climb the hills of Kashmir and negotiate those narrow, rocky roads. Next one, please. And this is, of course, the car doing what it was doing this morning, buying sweets at one of Kolkata's most respected sweet shops. Finally, Romit, the next one. Okay. All the speakers, including me, we will also spend a minute on what if we were told you can buy only one other car in the world, what car would you buy? So this is my choice, the Mercedes-Benz 540K, 8-cylinder of artistry in metal, supercharged, all independent suspension, excellent brakes, capable of more than 100 miles an hour, but more than anything else, heritage of unparalleled beauty. It's a car that would find a place, a timeless beauty in terms of design, in terms of the presentation, in terms of its majesty and its sporting looks. So these are my technical slides. I have a last set of slides which I will show you. And can we go on to the next one, please, Romit? I brought this up because this Humber belongs to Rabindranath Tagore, who, as you know, has written not just the national anthem of 2 countries, also won the Nobel Prize in Literature, a man who is a dominant force in our lives in more ways than one. I wanted to show this car because not only is it a majestic Humber, but it's also what you should not perhaps do with a car, which is to lay it up in mothballs. It's a restorable car. It's a doable car. Yet 2 of these cars, he bought 2 of them at the same time. One is in Vishwa Bharati in Shantiniketan. This one is at Ravindra Bharati University in Kolkata. None of them run. None have been moved even an inch for decades on end. And sadly enough, there is absolutely no effort to get this working. About the nature of the Humber, Raja, I think, is the best person. Raja, will you just unmute yourself and tell us, the majesty and the nature of the Humber car?
Well, the first thing to be noted is that the Humber was the official car of British officialdom. Their ministers, their generals, their officers all over the empire seemed to get this car to use. So its majesty, its preponderance over the roads of the empire, I don't think need any second introduction. They were not very fast cars. They were not very dashing cars. They can't hold a candle next to that Erdmann and Rossi Mercedes you showed us a couple of minutes ago. But in terms of choice, over a sheer longevity and quality of engineering, yes, this Humber cannot be faulted. It cannot be faulted. I sincerely hope that these cars are once again seen on the roads. Each and every automobile belongs to the roads, not a museum. Thanks.
Thank you, Raja. That's really wonderfully put. It's exactly what we heritage lovers would love to see cars on the road, cars restored, to see cars that are usable and represent what we were meant to be. So let's move on to our first speaker then. Rupak Ghosh, you're up with your very naughty MG sports car. Over to you, Rupak. I'll mute myself. Your presentation, you please 5 to 6 minutes, please, maximum. Thank you, Rupak.
Thank you.
Romit, can we have Rupak's presentation? Rupak, please unmute yourself.
Good evening, a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The car that I'm going to talk about and that I own, which you can see on your screens, is the 1948 MGTC. Well, where do I begin? I mean, just look at it. It's got the quintessential pre-war design, which MG, because of the war, could not really produce, and it only started producing after the war. And boy, it was a hit. It's said that the whole sports car cult in America was really brought about by this car, because the GIs after the war who were coming back to America got hold of these cars very cheap in England and in other parts of Europe and brought them down to America. And the American public just didn't know how to react to these small, lovely ladies. They zipped at 0 to 60 miles per hour at 22 seconds, which, ladies and gentlemen, please take note, was phenomenal in 1945. And compare them to the American muscles of that era in 45 to 50. The Buicks, the Pontiacs, the Oldsmobiles were hardly doing, I don't know, from 0 to 60 at maybe 30 or 40 seconds. So the American public went berserk, and this laid the foundation stone, if I may say, for the whole sports car cult. Now, the story as to how I got this car really started in 2008. In fact, my this whole passion about vintage cars started in 2008 when I saw Mr. Himanshu Ajmera's TC while I was coming down the flyover, the Ma flyover, and my wife had to put the lower part of my jaw back because I was dumbfounded. I didn't know what to do. I'd never seen anything as beautiful as this one. So much later in 2017, I heard of this car in Rajasthan, and I'll show you later in the slide how I found her. And I knew then and there that I had to get her. And I got her, and this is what you see on the first slide. So this is about 1250cc engine, 4-cylinder. It does about 60 horsepower, which back in the day, again, was quite a bit of power. With 2 SU carburetors, it really zipped. And only 10,001 were produced. And I'm lucky to have one of them here in Calcutta. And possibly once these pandemic regulations are lifted, you can see me any of those days in Calcutta Club with my TC parked in the parking. Now, if we can please move on to the next slide, then I can tell the audience that, you know, as Raja Uncle was saying a little while ago, the whole idea of owning these cars for me and for like-minded people in our club is to drive them. Just look at me. I mean, sans the mask, I mean, you can almost get the smile on my face. And here I am driving her and testing her on a almost deserted red road. And what a joy it brings to me. I really can't tell you, ladies and gentlemen. And the whole, again, another idea is to, the moment you negotiate the bumps, negotiate the gears, negotiate the rev band of these cars, you actually feel alive, which you will never find in a modern car. The modern car does everything for you. There's hardly any interaction between you and the car and you and the road. That is where the joy of these cars lie. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Now here is the quintessential British dashboard for you, ladies and gentlemen. Very basic. You can see the lovely veneered dash in the TC. On the extreme left is the mileometer. Then there is the dash lights, which in the other picture you can see they are on, and how lovely they look at night. Then there is the ignition switch, the dipper horn, the other controls. It's so basic. It's so basic information that you need and makes life so easy for a driver. And lack of electronics, my God, what a respite. What a respite, ladies and gentlemen. No electronics, everything electrical, mechanical, touch, feel, and she will go. So if you can go to the next slide. There you see the engine of the TC, and with the other things that you can find there. The red one is the ignition coil. Then the black one that you see on the right, just above the coil, is the fuel pump. Then you actually have the engine there, which has a nice shiny aluminium cover, rocker cover with MG crested on it. And it's a delight to look at her. I mean, I go down every now and then, especially in the pandemic, just to open the hood and take a look at her. I mean, I do that. Call me crazy, but I do that. And that's how it is. So if you can go to the next slide. Now here we have a little bit of showmanship, if you may say. Those two roundish chrome things that you see are the period correct air cleaners for the carburetor of the MGTC, but these were not stock. With due apologies to Raja uncle, these are not stock. These are period correct racing filters, air filters. But boy, they do look damn nice on the TC, and they were used extensively on the TC even back in the day. And we can go to the next slide, please. There you go. There you find the plates, which are essential for all cars even today. And just look at these plates. I mean, work of art. I mean, it's a painting on wheels. Just see how nicely they contrast with the color of the color scheme of the car. There you go, the MG Car Company, Abington-on-Thames, and with all details of the car to be etched on the plates. And we got it, and we will etch the correct specifications also as time goes by. And these are very, very important because of registration purposes in India and abroad. Very, very important. And interestingly, the chassis number, we had to actually sandblast the chassis to get the chassis number of this car. It was not visible even after a lot of effort from our side, and only after sandblasting did they emerge from under at least 60 years of rust. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Now there you can see on the left, ladies and gentlemen, a bit of a braided cloth wiring, which is interesting because that is period correct, because when we restore these kind of cars, we have, at least we try to be very, very close to authentic, to being authentic. And this is exactly the way this is to come when this to roll out of the factory in 45. And on the right, you will see interesting feature again, a belt holding the bonnet. Well, this was an age where, you know, racing cars and street legal cars were not far apart. You could actually take your car, take off the fenders and get into the races. And this belt, in fact, shows that. I mean, these were there so that during a racing, during a race, the bonnet should not fly off. And we have got it and we have put it just to add a little bit of bling to the car. If you can move on to the next slide, please. There you go. A giant leap of faith, ladies and gentlemen. The car that you saw in the other slides is this car as I found her in 2017. I had to take the giant leap of faith, and I must say it has paid off. Much to the ire of the wife and the ridicule of friends, I did it, and I am not repenting for sure. And I guess everybody here will agree. And that's my journey with the TC. And we can move on to the next slide, which, as Mr. Guptu had referred to, is my dream car. Well, just look at it. Continuing the same British tradition, another British classic, the Jaguar XK 140. It was called the 140 because it could reach speeds of 140 miles per hour, ladies and gentlemen, in the 50s. Can you believe that? Yes, it did. It had a 3.4 liter 6-cylinder engine, and it could do 0 to 60 miles from in about 8 to 9 seconds in 1950. That's an achievement. And forget all the statistics. Just look at those fenders. I mean, I could give off my right arm and maybe a kidney also to get into that car. So that's my dream car, and keep dreaming. Thank you.
Thank you, Rupak. Thank you. That was excellent and really well presented. You know, one of the advantages, this is only the first incarnation of such a show, because there are so many members in Calcutta Club who we wish to accommodate in future incarnations of this program. Rahul Sarkar, who's a marvelous restorer and collector. There's Momen uncle, Mr. Ghulam Momen, who sent us his best wishes from Nagpur, even when we sat down this evening, saying, Pradeep, this is a wonderful thing. I'll be back in November and we'll participate in a show then. There's Mr. Shubhrata Sen and his rear engine Mercedes-Benz, Jaideep Chitlangia's Packard, Adhir Kohli's Citroen, Shourojit, who I see here somewhere with his Ford and his Mercedes. There's Mr. Ardis, Austin, Mr. Beeds, Wolseley. There are so many cars. So I'm sure in future we'll have more programs like this and we'll be members of an avid audience at a later stage. Well, to chase down Rupak when he's escaping with the girl is Siddharth Swarup. Siddharth has this wonderful 6-cylinder Wolseley. And Siddharth, over to you.
Thank you. A very good evening to all the panelists and viewers of this program. Next slide, please.
Siddharth, a little louder, please, if you
Yeah.
don't mind. Yeah.
A very good evening to all the panelists and viewers of this program. Let me begin by telling you a brief history of my Wolseley. This Wolseley 1460 was purchased by my great-grandfather when he sailed to England on one of the first ships after independence. From England, it was transported to Banaras in 1947, and that's why one can see the Uttar Pradesh number plate on it. The car served him well for years to come. My father has seen the car during its glorious days and also enjoyed traveling in it, standing on the front seat with his head outside the sunroof. Let us now fast forward to 1991. Our ancestral property in Banaras was being sold, and this car was also meant to be disposed of. However, due to its condition, there were no buyers giving the true value. This car had been grounded for approximately 2 decades and wasn't in working condition. When this happened, I was asked whether I would like to have the car and restore it. Even though I was just 16 years old, I more than happily accepted the challenge. It was brought to Calcutta on a truck, and as luck would have it, it arrived on my birthday and was given to me as a birthday present. Unloading the car from the truck was a task. In fact, one of the ramps slipped during unloading and the car fell a few feet, but luckily no serious damage was done. The condition of the vehicle was evaluated. It was not in a very good shape. Many parts were either missing or damaged. Unfortunately, the Wolseley Motor Company had wound up in 1975, and that made it very difficult to source spares. I had to get most of the components fabricated in workshops and also found a few from old car shops. It took about 18 months to complete the restoration, but the car had been made roadworthy in the initial 6 months, and I recollect taking my father and my family for dinner to Taj Bengal on the occasion of my father's birthday in September 1991. The security guard was so impressed by the car that he allowed us to park it in the main porch itself. Next slide, please. In the 30 years the car has been with me in Calcutta, it has taken part in every vintage and classic car rally held annually and has won multiple trophies for performance in the road section and maintenance. Next slide, please. The car has been used in weddings, photo shoots, and also been featured in a magazine. In 2003, Mr. Shyam Benegal decided to use it in one of his movies on Netaji. The car went for shooting to various locations and studios in and around Calcutta. Next slide, please. Let me now take you through some of the special features of this car. In fact, many of these are not present even in modern day cars. This car is equipped with Jackall hydraulic jacks. As can be seen in the photo, one can lift the entire car above the ground, sitting inside with just a few strokes of a lever. The steering wheel is adjustable for both rake and reach. A spare tire compartment separate from the luggage area has been provided. It is really convenient because in the event of a puncture, the spare tire can be taken out without removing luggage from the boot. The radiator logo is backlit. Incidentally, this model was used as a police chase car, and anyone seeing the backlit logo in his rearview mirror knew he had some explaining to do. Next slide, please. The instrument cluster is backlit with a dimming feature. It houses the push button start and also a primitive cruise control system. The cabin is extremely roomy and silent with plenty of headroom. In fact, a lot of importance was given to noise insulation. Numerous microphonic readings were taken by acoustic experts to apply sound absorbing material in a scientific manner. Next slide, please. Yeah. For those technically inclined, the car is powered by a 1.8 liter 6-cylinder inline petrol engine which makes 60 bhp. It has twin horizontal SU carbs. Smooth pickup and acceleration is delivered by the Borg and Beck clutch with synchromesh in second, third, and fourth gears. Braking is provided by Lockheed hydraulic brakes. Direction is accurately controlled by the Bishop Cam steering in combination with Wolseley phase system, suspension system, which eliminates seesaw motion on rough roads. Electricals are all 12 volts. Yeah. Next slide, please. Finally, before I conclude, I would like to mention that I have designed a website for my car. The link is on the screen. The photos and data it contains could be of interest to many enthusiasts and even restorers. In case any further information is required, I would be glad to assist. Now moving on to my dream car. Next slide, yeah. Even though a lot of cars come to my mind, I would like to select the James Bond Aston Martin DB5. It is one of the most famous cars in the world and combines two of my passions, cars and gadgets. It is not only a timeless beauty, but also has a lot of gadgetry on board, such as hidden machine guns, passenger eject seat, smoke screen dispensers, bulletproof shield, oil spray system, radar screen, front and rear rams, and so on. It has a 4-liter inline 6-cylinder engine, which is all aluminum and pumps out almost 300 HP with a top speed of 233 kilometers per hour. Since 1964 till recently, it has been used in numerous James Bond movies like Goldfinger, Thunderball, Skyfall, etc. This is definitely a car I would like in my garage. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth. That was absolutely lovely. I mean, for those of us who've seen the movie, I think Witness for the Prosecution, the Chief Inspector of Scotland Yard actually comes to make his arrest in a car like your Wolseley.
Yes.
So you're in exalted company. Well, over to Prithvi. Prithvi has a couple of Italian beauties lined up. So Prithvi, over to you, and let's see your presentation. There is Prithvi and his Fiat.
Thank you, Pradeep Da. Good evening to everyone. So that's my Fiat 1963 Fiat 1100 Super Select. That's what the model was called in India. And I christened her Bella. In Italian, Bella means pretty. And I named her Pretty Girl because of the color scheme. I think she really stands out in a feminine, sort of a very pretty manner. This photo was taken in the 2019 Statesman Vintage and Classic Car and Bike Rally. And where she actually won, that was her first year in the rally, she won her class for maintenance. And, my thanks to Statesman for recognizing these cars which were dotted India in the 1960s and 70s, 1950s as well. For actually bringing them to the forefront. And I'm very glad that now India has a big fan following of Fiats which were manufactured and assembled in India in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Next slide, please. This is the car parked in Calcutta Club on one of my outings on a Sunday. You can see from the color scheme that it's dual tone. The Indian cars, the Indian Fiat Super Selects came in a single color scheme, but the Italian cars had an option of dual tone, and I chose to go the Italian way, and that's why the wheels also match the top, and I think it really highlights the delicate lines of the car. Incidentally, it was restored by Mr. Rahul Sarkar, a Calcutta Club member, who did a marvelous job on the car and restored it over a period of 10 months. Next, please. This again is somewhere in the Maidan on a nice, pleasant Sunday morning. I love to drive Bella. She's well known in Calcutta amongst the car circuit. She's also traveled to Bangalore. Dr. Prakash is here, and he spearheads the Federation of Historic Vehicles of India. And there was a Dasera drive from Bangalore to Mysore in 2019, in which we participated in this Fiat Bella, which I call her. And I trucked her to Bangalore. We drove from Bangalore to Mysore with 49 other fantastic classic cars. Next slide, please. And this is a shot of me driving the car. We drove from Bangalore to Mysore, which was not a big distance. But then after the event was over, after spending time with 49 other exalted beauties, where actually Bella held her own, and I was very proud of her. And we decided to drive her, took a chance and drove her from Mysore back to Calcutta, a distance of 2,400 kilometers. There were 3 friends, including me, both of who are here. And we had a fantastic time. We did it over a period of 56 hours, took 2 breaks in between. And she gave absolutely no trouble at all, which just goes to show that even if it's a 60-year-old car, if it's well done, you can drive it anywhere. And I do drive the car anyway. I drive her regularly. On the left side, the screen, you can see that the interiors have also been done to match with the exteriors. Next slide, please. This is the engine bay of Bella. It's very simple, but she has whatever you require. She's got windshield washer. She's got a throttle control on the dashboard to, climb up hills, hold it on hills, to warm her up in the mornings. She's got a fresh air ventilation system, and we tried to bring the engine bay as stock as possible by importing a number of parts which were missing, but which were originally found on these cars. Since these were early Fiats assembled in India, they had a lot of Italian components. And that's my 1963 Fiat 11. Next slide, please. This is my 1958 Mercedes, which is being restored currently. As Pradipda said, that it featured amongst the villains cars in Goldfinger, I think it was. And it's a 180A. It was nicknamed the Pontoon. It was fairly advanced for its day. It has a unitary construction platform, which was Mercedes's first foray into unitary construction design. And it's got a reasonably powerful 1.9 liter overhead camshaft engine with independent suspension and good braking. And she handles very well. And she's got a full length sunroof. And I'm hoping within a few months, she should be on the roads. Next slide, please. This is that 1.9 liter engine I was talking about. As I said, it's an overhead camshaft engine, and it's fairly advanced for its day. And I'd just like to end this segment by saying that as Rupak, I echo Rupak's feelings that it's just this visceral and this sense of, basically this sensual, visceral feeling that one gets out of driving these vintage and classic cars is what really lights me up. Like new cars, I mean, it just like Rupak said, it drives for you. I mean, you don't really need to put in any effort. But with these cars, you feel connected to the machine, you feel connected to the roads, and it just, heightens all my senses, which is why I love vintage and classic cars. Next slide, please. As to my dream car, this is a 1930s Alfa Romeo. The model is the 8C 2300. And it's an Italian car, being Alfa Romeo, and they were phenomenal back in the day. They were very powerful cars, essentially made for racing, though you did have street versions of this car. I mean, for me, it is the epitome of a pre-war vintage era sports car. They were highly advanced, a straight 8 engine with a supercharger, dual overhead camshafts, and they were raced by some of the best racing drivers the world has ever seen. Tadzio Nuvolari, Campari, Caracciola, you name it, they raced this car. And in fact, Alfa Romeo won Le Mans, which is a 24-hour endurance race, 4 years in a row, from 1931 to 1934. They won Le Mans, they won the German Grand Prix, they won the Monaco Grand Prix, I think they won the Italian Grand Prix, and that's why it's called the Monza, after I think the Monza circuit in Italy. And incidentally, Enzo Ferrari, when Alfa Romeo went into financial trouble and they withdrew from racing, Enzo Ferrari sort of became the outsourced racing team, and he raced these cars. He took up Alfa Romeo's racing program, and that's why in several of these Alfa Romeo Monzas, you will see the SF Scuderia Ferrari yellow logo. That's because it was Enzo Ferrari who actually, his outsourced team raced these cars. So Enzo Ferrari actually started his career in one of these Alfa Romeos. He realized he wasn't a very good driver, but he became a very successful race division. So that's where Enzo Ferrari started, on one of these cars. It's my dream car because, I mean, it was one of the fastest in its world at that time, won some of the most number of races. And today they go for anywhere between $5 to $15 million. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prithvi. That was delightful, and your choice of your dream car is impeccable. I cannot but commend you on such an excellent choice. We now come to Raja Mukherjee, who, as I said, I respect immensely for his judgment in all matters automotive. And Raja will tell us first about his Regal Rolls-Royce, a 12-cylinder Rolls-Royce Phantom 3, and his other cars and his dream car. So Raja, over to you. Now, we have a very tough taskmaster in our administrator who has threatened to blow the horn in case we exceed 7 minutes. So before that predicament hits you and we are struck by that lightning, may I request everybody to keep an eye on the clock. The horns are melodious, but nonetheless, they can be disconcerting. So Raja, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pradeep. Thank you, Calcutta Club and everybody. The horn's a very good idea because we couldn't survive with one on Calcutta roads. Good evening, everybody. And I'd like to start by showing you the Buick Super 8 Series 5019 47 that's been with me for about a quarter century only. It's not particularly a long car, but I bought it around the time my son was born and gave it to him. But it wasn't needing very great restoration. It was a fairly complete car, but it's now a very usable car, as the next some slides I will go on to show you. Here she is parked with the other older car, which we'll come to that later. Next slide, please. This is the car taken out somewhere at night, as you can see. So, this is one car that I have every confidence in using, She doesn't have power steering or power brakes or power this or power that, but that doesn't matter. It's excellent a car to drive even now for Calcutta, but yes, you need a horn. Next slide, please, for the interior. Now, these are the interiors of the car. There are corduroy cottons front and back, not leather. There was a choice at that time. GM gave a choice. Since this car came to the trough picks, I dare say that was why the choice of cotton, because that would cool it a little more. As you can see in the central console, there's a radio. It's still there in the car after all these years. There's a heater and a demister below that. The central mounted steering shift, 3 forward and 1 reverse gears, a simple horn ring, utterly delightful, utterly simple. Now, if we could please, I'd recommend this car to anybody. Now, here's our family car, been with us 20th of May 1938. I can stress the date because it was delivered on my grandfather's birthday in London. And she's more senior than I am in the family, so I can't patronize the car, rather the car can patronize me, and I dare say she does. But yes, whenever we take her out, even today morning, for example, there's only one word for it: serene. This is one word that comes to mind, and yet 12 cylinders, 7.3 liters, 4 forward gears, torque that's unimaginable, torque that's available unendingly and on tap, torque that will let you drive at 2 miles per hour in top gear while you walk by the side. Incidentally, my father taught me to do that, and today being Father's Day, I would like to dedicate these cars, my love for cars, my choice of cars, entirely to my father, who allowed me to get in and first play in these cars, and then my imagination ran riot and taught me first, this is a steering wheel and this is the gear lever and so on. Now, this car, as I said, was delivered new in Europe. This car was driven all over Europe in the year 1938. And most of its mileage of 7,300 miles was done in that one trip. 7,300 in Europe, I'd say. Even till today, it's done just about double that and a little more. And it's actually just 4-5 kilometers of Sunday, that sort of thing. It doesn't do much more than that. Now, if we go on to the next slides, I'd like to. Now, this is, in my opinion, a unique picture. I should say, our Rolls Royce and another Phantom 3, WBC1, owned by the Monem family, owned by Azam Monem, and that's his son Arshad posing with it, and my daughter Ritika posing with the car. This is absolutely unique. The two cars of a similar and very rare genre met up one morning in Calcutta after 50 years, and that was thanks to CDC and the efforts of the guy with the naughty car running away from the cops and the other guy who drives all over India. So thank you guys, you gave us something to cheer about. Now perhaps the next slide, please, Romit. Now we can see the interior. It's a 7-seater limousine, 7-seater with 2 foldable seats which are not visible in this immediate picture. The rear is in what's called West of England cloth. West of England being the mill from where the cloth was produced, and it was quite well known in those days. It's a leather-fronted interior. You can make out it's got a lot of wood that's actually made out of a Circassian walnut, if you would please. Now, I don't have a slide showing the close-up of the steering wheel, but most of the hand controls for the engine are settable by hand, the hand throttle, the choke, and suspension leverage gap control, which is something like a cruise control, but it's actually, we call it a riding control in this car. And there below that, everyone, the engine, 7.3 brilliantly engineered liters of perfection. A single downdraft Zenith carburetor with that massive air filter and intake. Now she has 2 plugs per cylinder, twin coils, twin distributors, twin everything. And the reason being that you can run 12 plugs of your choice at a time through some hand control set just left of the steering wheel. The idea being that if there's ever a problem with a set of plugs or a plug, you can immediately bypass it with the flick of the switch and go on to the next one, so you have an uninterrupted trouble. Now, this car, what does one say about it? Serene, excellent, perfection, magnificent, all of it. But above all, to me, it's our family's car, which I can't thank my grandfather, my father, enough for giving it to me. Perhaps we could go on to the next set of slides. Now this, everyone, is a car which I am now restoring. It's a 1948 Pontiac Silver Streak. Interestingly, this car had been taken apart, and when I say apart, I mean apart, into hundreds and if not thousands of its component parts by the gentleman who owned it, who wanted to restore the car. Unfortunately, he couldn't get around to it, so after 36 years, we are doing the job, and turning out to be far more painstaking than I thought. But when ready, she'll be exceptionally usable American saloon with all the manners and graces and effects of an American saloon. And now for the next bunch of slides, which will be a little surprise for everyone. 1961 Ambassador Mark I. Overhead valve engine, familiar to everybody, I think. You can see that overhead valve engine in the photographs in the center. Runs still very well, half start turn. As you can see, the interiors have all been done up. Very, looks like new, feels like new. Steering awfully new, awfully tight. I should explain the other words. Again, a very good usable Sunday car. Take it anywhere, take it to go anything, do anything. That was the beauty of the ambassador. I think the time has come to introduce you all to my dream cars. So perhaps if Romit, now, when I have these cars, my address will surely be care of heaven. That red beast on the right, it's a Packard 12. What does one say about them? V12, 7.3 liters, again, 24 valves was standard. Nothing else was standard. This beast could do between 107, about 170 bhp, and it could do 0 to 120 seconds, which was extremely fast, extremely quick for a car in those days and of this size. Simply the best in American craftsmanship, materials, refinement, customization. You know, there's often talk of the American Rolls. To my mind, if any car could ever achieve that particular accolade, this is the car. Car currently in Hollywood, this particular car, there are privacy issues for which I won't go on further about it. And the car on the left, that's the Bentley S2 Continental, two-door. Most of these cars came two-door, and if you had the four-door version, then they would have been called the Flying Spur. Again, the coachwork was by Mulliner, James Young, Park Ward, Freestone Webb, and other such excellent coach builders. And why this is of interest is that it's the very first time that Rolls-Royce changed their six-cylinder engines, which they used in the smaller horsepower Rolls and Bentley. And this one was a V8 6.2 liters. But the refinements it gave was, that's Monday. The refinements for 1958 was power steering, air conditioning, automatic gearbox with 3 forward and 1 reverse. It was an immaculate and excellent car to drive. And these are the two cars I think I'd go way out of my way ever to try and obtain, because they would do nothing but just add so much of value to anyone's collection, anyone's garage. Now, have we finished with the slides, Romit, before I yield the mic?
Yes, Raja, I think we have.
Right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Raja. That was absolutely fascinating. And if Raja tells you that his Rolls-Royce is serene, don't you believe him? I've taken many a ride on it, and the days he has been indiscreet with his right foot, the rapid velocity of that car has shocked the daylights out of both him and me. I mean, it's a remarkable vehicle, limousine moving like a rocket, like a missile. You know, it's an incredible engine.
Mr. Moderator, I did it again today morning on wet roads.
Yes, I know. I called you in the middle of that, and I immediately disconnected because I did not want you to have an accident at that time. But it's remarkable. It's really remarkable. The only thing I disagree with him is I prefer the Duesenberg. He prefers the Packard. We have a constant fight about this, which we'll settle at some other platform. Our next speaker is Billy. And Billy has a wonderful collection, but he'll talk about the immortal car, the Ford Model T, which both Raja and I absolutely insisted, because the youngsters who are here, Vivan, Arav, and all the others, the Ford Model T sold over 15 million cars, right? But it had a different way of driving. And Billy Uncle will tell you how the world's largest selling car in many ways was actually a very different car and yet a car. So Billy, over to you. Unmute yourself, please, Billy. Yeah.
Am I audible? Am I audible to everybody? Yeah, okay. First of all, thank you organizers, thank you Calcutta Club for giving me a chance to talk on my favorite subject, heritage cars. When you see, heritage to us, there are monuments, buildings, clocks, statues, everything. But to me, to enthusiasts around, this is heritage for us, heritage on wheels. Okay, coming quickly to the subject. Yeah, the Model T. I'm happy that I have Dr. Ravi Prakash, who's also an owner of a Model T with me. In case I go wrong, he can just correct me, because I'm sure he also drives it regularly. As you can see, the Model T right now in front of you, this was voted the car of the century. Henry Ford's very famous Model T. He had a very typical catch line. You can paint it any color as long as it is black. Okay, now for all my young viewers, let's see how we start the car. You can see the cranking, right? That handle just behind that car of the century board. So you basically crank the car, she comes to life, and so the engine is moving, right? So just move on to next slide, kindly, please. Okay, this was basically a Ford that was made in Canada, because many of the other Model Ts, they're also made in USA. Now, coming to the main thing, like how we drive this car, let's look into the top right, okay? This is something similar to what we see for the modern car, like let's visualize a modern car, the manual one, of course. On your left, we have the clutch, in the middle, we have the brake, right, we have the accelerator. Model T, it looks like a car from outside, very simple to look at, but now let's come to the driving part of it. Now, this car has got only 2 gears going front and 1 reverse. How does it work? Okay, we've already started the car. She's already on crank mode on. Now, the C that you see, that is actually not the clutch. You press that, the car starts moving forward. Increase, now coming to the steering wheel on the right, I just have to mix up a little bit. Coming to the steering wheel on the right, if we can zoom in later, there are 2 levers. One is for the spark adjuster and another one is a throttle. So you increase the throttle a little bit, you'll see there's a small gear on the below right, next to the right door. You put that from the middle portion, you put it in front, and that is the only gear. You increase the accelerator and she starts moving. That's the only second gear of this car. Right, so she's in motion. Now, what do you do to slow her down? Right, in the modern roads, you start obviously using the brake. Where is the brake? The brake is the modern car's accelerator. Now you start pressing the brake. Mind you, this brake has got no connection with the wheels, right? So how does the car stop? So it basically jams the crankshaft slowly, or the propeller shaft for many people who call it propeller. So you just jams it and you start thinking, when you're going to stop, you start pressing that, the car's revs to slowly start coming down, right? And if it stops, go look into your astrology. What does your astrology say? The car will stop, the car will stop. That's your good luck, your fate. And what do we have in the middle? That is not the brake. That is the reverse gear. Okay, so you need to reverse. You press what is the modern car's brake, and this car starts reversing. Okay, and now what if you forget? You're used to driving a modern car. Press all 3 together, she'll come to a stop. Right. Coming to the engine, she's a 4-cylinder, 2.7 liter engine. Very old. This car used to run mainly on magnetos. Coming to, again, the interiors, very typical leather seats. You can see the gasoline meter out there. The horn is non-electronic. You press it and the car makes a noise and it starts moving. You've heard of cruise control? No, it is not a modern thing. Ford came with cruise control way as early as 1908 and right up 1970 and so on. The accelerator is actually in the hand. You control your speed with your hand lever right there. Okay, so that's all about mainly the Model T for you. We move on to the next slide. The Auburn 680, 1928. This is a very rare car. And this is probably, this particular model is the only one remaining in Asia right now. This particular car, many of you notice, just above the spotlight carries the BLB number plate. BLB, many get confused. Where does the registration come from? BLB is actually for undivided Bengal. So hence the number you see, it comes as BLB. This car, used to be owned by the Shoabaja Rajbari, the Dev family. And we basically got it from there. They being a Raj family, they never wanted to give it up. My father, Mr. Partha Bose, who's been into restoration of vintage cars and was into high-speed car rallying. It's from him that I got the passion. So he said, okay, we don't get things for free. Finally, a kind of settlement was done. In Bengali, we have this thing called Rabri, which I know there are lots of Bengali viewers. For the non-Bengali viewers, very famous Bengali sweet. So a special pot of Rabri was made and this car came in exchange of Rabri. Now, I will just move on to the next slide to explain more on the Auburn. Coming to the Auburn, you will get to see a lot of cars, be it the British cars, Italy and European cars. American cars used to come on leather. As far as the Auburn used to always come mainly in flashy colors, mainly in twin colors. Auburn used to come with this particular upholstery called mohair. You know, many of us, if we go back to our school days, the blazer material that used to have is something similar. You know, America, most of America is pretty cold, especially the East Coast. So mohair used to, you know, give that comfort in the cold weathers. This car, you know, you have got 4 windows which can roll up. If you can see from the steering, there are handles which makes you basically roll up your glasses. The hood comes up and a convertible car can become a saloon. This is basically a 6-cylinder, as you can look in the slide at the lower bit below there. But you know, the power of this car is humongous. It's crazy. It can be compared to an 8 also. More on the engine on the below right, and a beautiful classy instrument panel, which has got everything, you know, starting from, of course, the fuel gauge, the temperature, the speedometer. Speedometer, mind you, it is not the needle. It basically revolves, shows your speed like that. It basically goes from east to west and moves on like that. So that's on the Auburn. We move on to the next one. I know, like, as you know, Ross Brawn had told Michael Schumacher, you have got 19 laps and 25 seconds to make up. So I've got to make up 6 cars in the span of 6 minutes. Okay, here we come onto the Rolls-Royce. You know, this is the 1930-2025 limousine. Rolls, you know, in those days, you mainly used to basically give you the engine and the chassis. You had to select your coach builders. In our case, it was this car has been done by Thrupp and Mapelli. They were the basically coach builders for this particular car. This car definitely has a kind of history. There were only 1 of 8. This particular model was done. This car came for Mr. Viscount Waverley, who was the last governor, probably Bengal from the 1928 and 1932 period. He was also the Home Minister of the British Empire, especially during the World War II. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Typical limousine, as you can see, you know, very poshly done inside, a lot of leather you can see the ceiling done with typical woodwork in those days. A 6-cylinder inline engine, very powerful, you know, like in those days, 25 horsepower for a normal car, it was good. She's smooth. I was asked a question by many of my friends, you know, since I was also into, you know, motorsports, the high-speed one, and also parallel into vintage cars. They said, Billy, you have, you know, uncle has restored so many cars, as in my father, Parthasaran Bose, and, you know, like, what is so special about the Rolls-Royce? You know, it's got 4 wheels, 2 stepneys, like many cars of that era, 2 headlights. So what is so special? This car, before it came to us, this car was lying literally unused for 30 years. Can you imagine 30 years? And all we had to do, surprisingly, even I, you know, was shocked. We just had to clean up the carburetors, clean up the spark plug, clean up the petrol tank. And believe me, it was just a half crank start. That's what a Rolls-Royce is. If you look minutely onto the engine, you will see the RR embossed literally everywhere. The bronze that you see on picture, the slide 5, that's the horn. You can see the carburetor, the spark plugs, and that's the beauty of Rolls-Royce, all the instrument panels and everything. You could literally, the levers that you see, that's got the hand throttle, the levers that you see down the steering, you can adjust your suspension. Everything was there on the steering. As the previous speakers have said, we are in this era of heritage cars where we can talk to the car doesn't drive us. We also can drive the car. It's a mental thing with these cars. More on to the next slide, please. Well, this is a very typical of the Buick of the straight 8s, 1931 Buick straight 8. As you can see, a lot of chromium parts, very flashy looking car. In those days, one of my father's first cars in 1985 was lying in a garage. The guy was more than happy to get rid of this car. Then we can move on to the next slide. Yeah, people thought my dad is mad in that time. You know, he picked up a car in 1984 for probably 1,500, 2,000 rupees. We restored this car. As you can see, the typical, you know, the modern day sofa, that was the seat of this car. You can see the instrument panel. It's got everything that you can ask for, everything to direct you. You've got the choke there. And ignition. How do you start the car? I mean, that's not the clutch that you see below the instrument panel. That's basically the starter motor. You press that and the engine comes to life. More on the engine, that's the 8-cylinder, very, very powerful. Trust me, you just press on the throttle and she flies. Next one, please. Yeah, here we have, like, what we spoke on Rupok's MG. This car, previous to the MG, this was also a dream sports car. It was the SS, the standard Swallow or Swallow side car, and then the Jaguar name comes in, where the Leaping Cat logo came in this car. Let's move on to the next slide so that I can keep on talking with the car, on the car. Next slide, please. Yeah, as you can see, the body is very swanky, very fashionable in those days. One very rare thing you all may have noticed are the racing windshields, and it's also got the main windshield. The main windshield, the rectangular one, used to come up for more of a city drive. Once on racing mode, once on the racing track, you could put that down and use the racing windshield. The instrument panel, very typical of British, it had the hand throttle on the right. It's got the ref counter, the speedometer, the temperature meter, the ampere meter, oil pressure, petrol tank, everything. The switch in the middle, is to switch on your electricals headlight. One very interesting thing that you may notice is the design of the interiors, the upholstery. That's basically, the door that you see, the panel on the door. It's basically a sunrise design. You can see a little bit of the sun and the sun rays on the door. The 6-cylinder double carburetor, and boy, she still moves. Absolutely. She can give any of the modern cars a competition. Okay, not maybe exaggerating on that, but yes. Coming to the Pontiac Chieftain 6, 1952, another American beauty. We got a call at 1 o'clock that one of the Americans are going for a scrap. We rushed to a place called Malik Bazaar. We got her home. Next few pictures, please. Next slide. As you can see, that is how finally after restoration, that's how she looks like. You got the typical beautiful steering wheel, looks huge, looks like a truck. But like this Pontiac, if you feel it, the feeling is just like a power steering, if not something better. You've got the instrument panel, you've got a speedometer there, and all the other necessaries like the petrol tank and all, as I keep on repeating the same. You can notice the radio, you can notice the air vents out there. This car it was a direct import. Hence, you can see the steering is on the left. I'm sorry I had to rush through this because I have a time limit. Any questions that you all want, you all can please ask me. I'll be more than happy to answer. Coming on my dream cars, having racing motorsports blood in me, I obviously had to go for the Bentley 1931 4.5 liters. She can still burn any track. That power of that car, along with the British Racing Green design, it's simply brilliant. Okay, and another one, the Italian beauty, Isotta Fraschini or Isotta Fraschini, it's a proper noun, pronounce it the way you want. The 1929 model, with this kind of a multiple design in that car. It looks brilliant. It's got the power, it's got the design, it's chauffeur driven, it's royal, you name it, and this car has it. I have to somehow finish here. Thank you for hearing me out. Any questions, please feel free to ask me.
Thank you, Billy. That was indeed fascinating. I know Romit Beed was dying to honk the horn, but you escaped it by the skin of your teeth. Romit, why don't you honk the horn once, just to let us know, warn us that what to expect if we overshoot. Can you play it for us once? No? Okay. We have next Paulo and Saurav Roy, and the father and son team have done a wonderful, wonderful job, not only of cars that are being driven around Kolkata, but also of the historic Wanderer that was used by Subhash Chandra Bose. They have a marvelous presentation, starting off with their family Studebaker limousine and ending off with a short film, perhaps on the Wanderer and the restoration process. So over to you, Pallav, and then we've already had a couple of questions, and maybe we'll try to take them at the end. Pallav, over to you.
Good evening.
You need to unmute yourself.
Am I audible?
Yes. And you need to speak up a little bit, Paulo, perhaps closer to the mic if you don't mind.
Okay, good evening to everyone, and thank you Calcutta Club and the moderators for giving us an opportunity to speak and present our cars. Let me take you back a little bit in time. During the 1920s, our country was ruled by the British, and it was customary for the gentry to buy the British cars. But then America had done some very wonderful engineering, and the company, the Studebaker, had a heritage of building coaches and wagons for 76 years. In the year 1928, they innovated the 8-cylinder after the big sixes, and they wanted to showcase their modern engineering to the gentry and the market of India. So for this purpose, they sent over 2 cars to India, and first of all to Kolkata or Calcutta. And there was a motor show, and one of the cars was a closed car. It was for demonstration purpose, and the other one was a tourer, which was for sale. My grandfather, Raja Kamalaranjan Roy, he went to the car show and he selected the closed car, and the dealer, after taking due permission from the Studebaker Corporation Indiana, they had to sell it to him. Now here I have presented 2 very interesting photographs. One is a photo of the dealership shop in USA, and the other is the collection of cars that were on display sometime in 1928 and in USA. On the top right, you find the Studebaker motor cars. So that is the original sales brochure, which was printed in the year 1928. And if you look closely, you will find that the car is presented, and the probable customer has arrived riding on the horse and is looking interestingly at the car. And he is the customer that the corporation was eyeing for. My grandfather, Raja Kamalaranjan Roy, he bought this car from the French motor car dealership, and in the year 1928. And this car was his, amongst many other cars, this was his most favorite car, and he used this car for his official use. And the car was housed in his palace at Kashim Bazar, and for most of the prime time it stayed there. And thereafter, whenever he used to go to Benares, he would take the car by train to Benares, and from there he would be driving to Allahabad and Benares and enjoying the car. Also in the year 1938, when his title was given, so he had driven in this car to Raj Bhavan to receive his title. After that, there was long gap, and in the year 1953, when the Zamindari system was abolished, the palace and everything was forgotten, and the car was kept in the stables of the Kashim Bazar Palace, and it was completely forgotten. But sometime during the year 1960s, my father, Prashant Kumar Roy, he decided to bring the car back to Kolkata and reassemble the car and give it a new life. And we are very, very thankful to him for having brought the car from Kashim Bazar to Kolkata. And here is one of the very early pictures of him, of the car taking part in the Kolkata Statesman Vintage and Classic Car Rally. It took us about 6 years to restore the car, but at this time I had no idea that the car was something so unique. It is only when I could put my hand on the original sales brochure that I realized that it was a very, very exclusive and unique car. It was the 1928 President 8 State Limousine for 7. So there is a reference for this car in many magazines and auto journals, but the car actually is not existent anywhere other than this particular model. And this was a right-hand driven model which Studebaker manufactured specially for India and for the gentry to see. On the right, we find the spirit of Atalanta, which is the Greek goddess of speed, very cleverly designed by the artist Karl Moss and commissioned by Studebaker. And she stood on the top of the radiator, gracing the overall ambience. Here we see some of the interior photographs. As per the original sales brochure, I have been able to restore the car exactly in the same way. The front is done in real black leather, and the door trims are done in lacquer. So that is a finish of American walnut. So in those days, it was not possible that people did not have the technology to shave the burr walnut, the fine shavings. So they found it convenient to to hire artists to paint. So the dashboard and the door panels are painted in the trim of American walnut. On the right, you see there's a silver medallion on the door trim. So that is a horse carriage with the passengers and with 8 horses and the postman sitting on top. So this depicts the lineage of Studebaker Corporation manufacturing the beautiful carriages for the last 76 years. Behind the driver's seat is a glass partition, so which is typical of a limousine. And here you find the beautiful upholstered seats. 2 of the seats is a 7-passenger limousine. So 3 passengers are sitting at the back on the sofa, and there are 2 foldable seats which are not visible here. And the seats, the upholstery is done out of broadcloth, which is a woolen suit material in those days. It was typically used to keep the passengers warm. And the ceiling is done in mohair, which is a woolen velvet. And the carpet is thick Wilton weave velvet. And also the car has silk sunshades and bud glasses done in cut glass, and also robe rails. So these are the various things, the luxuries that were present in the cars. It also has 2 fans and a wiper which works pneumatically through the air drawn to the suction from the intake manifold. The other things that are there are cigar lighters. There are 2 of them. One is in the front dashboard, which is a recoiling unit. So if you release the handle, it will go back, wind itself back into the dashboard. And in the rear, we have the ashtrays on one side, and the other side is a vanity case for the ladies. Perhaps the most interesting feature in this car is the intercom. In the year 1928, Pictograph Corporation of America, they were pioneers in producing telegraphic equipment, and they innovated the first intercom ever to be used in limousines like Rolls-Royces, Packards, Duesenbergs, Studebaker. So this car has the first electrically operated intercom. So the passengers presses a button on the phone, and the driver is able to hear his commands through a speaking unit with the volume control behind his head. So this was a very, very unique feature in those days. Coming down to the engine, so this was one of the most powerful cars of that era. It is a 313 cubic inches, or about more than 5,000 cc, and developing 100 horses, not brake horses, but 100 horses. So which was perhaps the most powerful car of that era. Amongst many other innovations, you will find that the horn is visible here, which was developed by the company called Spartan. And it was a bugle horn, but it was also a mechanically driven, but air horn. So if you press the button, so the horn motor would work and it will emit the air, and there would be a pattern. If you look closely on the advertisement on the left, you will find the melody also written on the staff notation. In case some of you are able to read the staff notation, so that is what the song that is played. So here is the car that is fully restored, exactly as per the owner's sales brochure, which was printed in 1928. So Saurav and I, we are very happy that it has been restored to its full glory. This is a photograph of a 1963 Ford Zephyr that my father had bought. And this is an English Ford and used in England by the police to chase the thieves. Unfortunately, we don't have the car anymore, but since I had the picture, I thought it was nice to show it to all of you here. This is me with my mother, as we were, both of us were very young at that time. This is another car. It's a 1947 Chevrolet Fleetmaster sports sedan. This is a very unique car because it was at one point of time owned by the Bikaner Royal State. I had bought it from one dealer, in a rundown condition, and thereafter I have used all the information that was available on the net and also through the owner's sales brochure to restore this car exactly to the showroom standards. And here's the car. Look how beautiful it is from the side and also from the rear. Some photographs of the interior. Even in this case, the dashboard is finished in walnut, but it is not a hand painting. It is a transfer of decal that was customarily used in the cars of that era during the 1940s. So we have exactly used the same technology to redo the trim through the transfer of decals. On the dashboard, there's a glove box on the left. There's the clock, a mechanical clock, then the speedometer, then temperature meter, then oil pressure meter, and so on and so forth. But what is most interesting is if you look closely, it has got the original AM radio. It's a Valset radio, and it is still working in great condition. So whenever we like to listen to the old traditional music, we sit in the car and switch on the radio, and it plays beautifully. If you look at the rear, there you will find the curtains are visible because since the car was commissioned by the Bikaner Royal State, it had the original fixtures to put up the curtains. So we have just put in the curtains, but the original fixtures were there for the ladies who were traveling, so they had to be behind the curtain. This is a 1967 Mercedes 230S. My son Saurabh will present it.
Yeah, so this is a car which is very close to my heart. So because this is the first car that we bought, old car that we got, and this is the first car that we managed to restore. So this is also the car we started all the madness with the restoration and acquiring new cars, new old cars, to be very honest. So this is also a very important car for Mercedes because they had an American influence in designing this car. If you see at the rear, there are subtle tail fins, so which was very interesting because Mercedes was trying to sell it to the American market. And in Germany, these tail fins were called as Heckflosse. In terms of passenger safety also, this was a very important car for Mercedes because they featured front and rear crumple zones first in their cars and also had many passive safety features like padded dashboards and also breakaway interior mirrors. Now this car is finished in a Mercedes correct color called Obsidian Black. Now if you look at the interiors, it's a beautiful shade of red, and we were very lucky so that the original upholstery was preserved, and it's called the Mercedes patented thing as MB-Tex. This car also has a beautiful wooden fascia and also has a Becker radio. And the beautiful part about the speedometer is that it goes up vertically, and it actually changes color from yellow, and if you cross 60 kilometers per hour, it becomes red. Now this is a 1951 Mercury sports sedan. It's also a car in which I learned restoration hands-on, and I have done the painting on this car myself. And this particular shade is called Banning Blue Metallic. It's exactly the shade as it came from the factory in Canada, and it's called Banning Blue Metallic, and it simply glitters in the sun. You can look at the beautiful dashboard of the car. This car also incidentally has the original radio, and this car has a flathead V8. So it was a very powerful and smooth engine, and I have also rebuilt the engine myself. And the dashboard, if you look at the dashboard meters, it has a very beautiful clock in the middle. The ammeter is there, the fuel gauge, the temperature gauge, the speedometer are all done beautifully. The interior was optioned in this car in two-tone leather, the original interior was definitely torn and tattered after many years of abuse. And we have replicated the exact color combination of the interior and we have put it back together with genuine leather. Now, coming to dream cars, this is a car actually that we own, but you can see that it's in such a dilapidated condition that it would actually be a dream. So if we can restore and put it back on the road. So it's a 1938 Mercedes 170V Roadster. And when restored, it should look something like that. So if you look at the body line, it's beautifully done. And the interior is simple and elegant, done in classic leather. If you look at the back, there's a hidden compartment. You can open it up, and there are two seats. It was called, the technical term is called a rumble seat, but colloquially it was called a mother-in-law seat because this seat was not very comfortable to sit in. And you can look at the dashboard, the beautiful Mercedes cream color meters. So it is actually our dream that one day we can get our car into a condition something similar to this.
So, Pradipta, should I continue with the Wanderer?
Yes. Would you like to show the film straight away? Because
Yes,
that
just
might be
one or two
interesting.
lines and then I will go to the
Yeah, please.
So this is a very, very special project and something very close to my heart that happened. And Netaji Research Bureau had this Great Escape car in their museum for many, many years. It was completely broken and run down. But then they had contacted Audi Kolkata to restore this car. And the CEO of Audi Kolkata, he commissioned me and my son to go ahead with this project after he saw the restoration of our Studebaker. Incidentally, I would like to share one small information. As I said, in 28, there were two Studebakers which were sent to Kolkata. The Tourer was for sale. The other one was for demonstration. The state limousine was bought by my grandfather. But what happened to the Tourer? The Tourer was bought by none other than Sharat Chandra Bose. Sharat Bose had bought that car. And during the planning of the Great Escape, the first trial was done in the Studebaker President 8 Tourer. But the car was very, very well known. And it traveled to Burdwan on a trial run and it broke down over there and it could not be brought back immediately. So the Great Escape was planned on the lesser known Wanderer, which was much younger and newer. Here, I will show you a very small short clip which shows the restoration. And after that, if you have any questions, I will be very, very happy to answer them.
Saurabh, will you play the film, please?
Yeah, it's playing.
I can't.
Okay, I'll just.
You need to stop share and share again.
Thank you. We've had a couple of questions. We'll come to that after the movie.
On the night of 16th, 17th January 1941, at about 1:35 a.m., Subhash Chandra Bose left his bedroom just behind me, along with my father, Shishir Kumar Bose, and walked along the entire length of this corridor to the rear staircase. He went down the staircase where my father had parked his car, the Wanderer W24 of 1937. it's a matter of great satisfaction that the historic Wanderer car has been restored to its original pristine condition.
Thank you, Pallav and Saurabh. That was absolutely beautiful. It was so nice seeing that restoration. And as I said right at the beginning, let's hope that Rabindranath Tagore's Humber also receives the attention that it deserves, and we get to see this one, both the wonderful cars on the roads again. Whoever does it, but somebody should do it. The only correct place for an automobile is the road, and there is no other substitute for that. A lot of questions have come in, but one in particular, Raja, are you here? There was a question about Stewart and Company. Till Raja comes on board, let me tell you, if you're a member of the Calcutta Club, our library has a lovely, has many lovely old volumes. And in one of the volumes, there's a detailed history of Stewart and Company, complete with line drawings from their coach building and palanquin building days right down to the modern automobile bodybuilding days. So anybody who's interested in Stewart and Company, if you can contact anybody in the library in Calcutta Club, I'm sure we are hospitable people. As I said, we'll be happy to help out. Raja, would you like to...
I have been going to the library for ages, but I never knew about the existence. This is really something, really something.
Yeah.
Stewart and Company...
Raja, yeah, sorry, carry on.
No. Stewart and Company existed in Calcutta, as far as I know, when South Bengal, at that time, Calcutta is too extravagant a term to use, perhaps. South Bengal, their existence comes up somewhere, in my knowledge, of the 18th century, the early 18th century. And they used to do horse carriages that were in the enclosed line, which was more the parda carriages. As you can understand, there was a huge demand in those days for what was called parda carriages, we used by ladies who were parda nashin, and for some of the European gentry. They would bring they bought their coach building expertise from somewhere in England. I don't really know exactly where. And these people carried on to building for not just for the horse carriages, but palanquins, horse-drawn carts, even the hand-pulled rickshaws that were found in the olden days hill stations. And, well, when automobiles, the internal combustion engine changed everything, then they actually tried their hands at first the lorry stage, with first the open lorry stage. You understand, commercial transport, lorries and bodied lorries for buses and trucks. And thereafter, they started, because there was no original automobile manufacturer in India Overland of America tried it sometime in the 20s, but they were unitary construction cars. They built their own bodies. So Stuart used to do something called rebodying, if you understand. Like suppose you have a car and you're not quite happy with the body on it. You took it to Stuart and say, look, build me something on these lines, a fancy body. And they do it. So they were, for as far as automobiles were concerned, they were rebodiers. They were never original bodywork, but they did an amazing number of cars, including many Rolls-Royce or larger cars of that genre, let's say, large American cars, other English cars such as Daimler or Wolseley, etc. And they were, by the way, given appointment as coach builders by the Viceroy and the Governor. So in those days, that was quite significant. That was very significant. To the best of my knowledge, Stuart survived in Calcutta till 1970. They were only doing bus bodies by there till then. And then they shut shop. Their factory and shop was in what is now Ponditya Road, and a huge multi-story building has come up over there. Sum total of my knowledge.
Yeah.
I am not sure about
Thank
any
you, Raja. Just
more
to
additions
reiterate,
you could.
there are some bound volumes of Bengal past and present in our library. Next time we go to the library together, I'll take out the volume and show you wonderful line drawings, because at that time past and present was doing line drawings mainly. And it's a fascinating journey of Stuart. And as Raja said, you know, the cars that you saw today are a tribute to our workmen. I think Pallav and Billy and Siddharth and Prithvi, Rupak, all of us, including my baby Austin, many of our cars have been comprehensively rebodied. And this was possible only because we have marvelously talented workmen who can follow either a tool or a jig or a drawing and actually recreate a wonderful bodywork. So any more questions? There was, we mentioned at the beginning about the Motor Vehicles Act, which threatened to render all vintage cars extinct. Luckily, it appears that the government is renegotiating. So registration did become difficult for a short while. Hopefully, registration of vintage cars will become more easier. I got an email from a friend who restores cars in the US. All that they've done with their old cars is that they've required that you put in a small battery and you put in front and rear lamps. Even if you have oil lamps, you put in makeshift electrical fittings so that you are visible on the road in the evenings. And this is what he has done with a lot of very old American cars. And believe you me, the designs or the pictures he sent me were of very unobtrusive LED lamps, round brake lamps for the rear, an LED light for the number plate, front side lamps, small LED lamps for the front, all operated by either an engine-driven dynamo or by a battery unit fitted to the car. So this gentleman lives in North Carolina. He restores quite a few cars, and it was very interesting to see their experience. But anyway, we have gentlemen of great expertise on this forum. So I'm sure if anybody has any ideas about registration and compliance with modern laws, we'll be happy to avail of it. Meanwhile, the administrator, I don't know how much time we have, so I'm going to beat a hasty retreat and hand the mic back to the administrator. And before that, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Srivardhan. Thank you, Mr. Gautam Sen, and Tathagato was here from Bhubaneswar. We had several other visitors. Mr. Ravi Prakash is still here. Thank you, sir, for being here. And it's always a pleasure and a delight to know that our fraternity of heritage lovers, of automotive heritage lovers, is a pan-Indian movement. And we are sure that we will take this forward. As I said at the beginning, the one dream we have is to actually have our automotive show in the Calcutta Club car park once things get back to normal. Shorajit Pal Chaudhary, I can see you're nodding, nod a little more vigorously, please, so that we know that you're on board with us. Back to you, Mr. Administrator, Mr. Adip Guptu, to, I guess, draw the proceedings to a close.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being patient and giving us this time of yours. And
a little louder, please. We can't hear you.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us and logging in tonight.
as you would see, we've seen, we wanted to do justice to all the cars and the proud owners, and how they have the work that has gone behind them, and the work which goes in day and day out to maintain them this way. So that's something that all of us can be proud of. So all members of the Heritage Subcommittee and the Library Subcommittee, the President and the IT Committee and the Systems team, thank you for your the permissions for us to go ahead with this. Ad Infinitus and Shohini for the creatives, for the invites and the presentations, the work which has gone behind the changes and the feedback of going them and making them possible. Romit Beed, our technical pillar, the support without whom we could not have this show, and the ones that we have done before for playing the presentations, and the father and son duo for presenting us this video, which was so special with all of us. And Romit will have quite a, we're trying to record this program, but we didn't want to do, we wanted to do justice with everybody. As regards the audience, I was stunned. The students are of the amount of enthusiasm, as someone mentioned, I think Mr. Ravi Prakash. I mean, we are hopeful and optimistic that this is what the next generation, I mean, the enthusiasm that we see, and that is what these programs are for, to, move, like, hand over the baton to the next generation. I mean, this is the objective of this program. And thank you, Arav. Thank you, Mr. Prakash, for pointing this out. The members who've joined in, a lot of you have joined in. You've liked the previous shows from the Library Subcommittee, but this was the first one that we did it from the Heritage Subcommittee. And this was something our own subcommittee members here, Mr. Raja Mukherjee, Romit Beed, they made it happen. And from library, we had Piali, who's sending out the links to all of you. We had a lot of rest area, and seeing us through this and gives us ideas. Why don't we do the next one with all their cars at Chennai? I mean, that seems to be another reservoir. I mean, we knew about Delhi, we knew about Kolkata, but so much of interest. I mean, why not? So, and of course, the panelist, the birthday boy, Billy. I mean, I'm sorry to hold you up in the celebrations, but please go ahead and keep a slice for us. We'll be joining you soon. The common thing, the bondage across all the panelists here, the love for their cars, whether it's vintage and classic, whether it's, Pallav, the father and son duo, Prithvi, Rajada, Rupak, Siddharth. Thank you and your families for preserving these treasures and making us, giving us an opportunity to share these moments with you. And of course, the moderator. Who else could have installed you and kept the show together, sharing the passion of, car mat lovers, getting all the panelists together. Thank you, moderator, for doing this. And on this note, sorry, we have a time constraint. As you know, we have one more show tomorrow. We're celebrating World Music Days. So we have to pass on to give out time for that. So we are getting into that soon. So that's why our time is running out. Thank you for being patient. And of course, the next weekend show, please stay tuned in. We'll be doing the launch of Mr. Jairam Ramesh's book on Buddha. So the invite will reach you soon in a day or two with the Zoom link to join all of us. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a nice Sunday. Good night.